So the one thing I will say, when the internet went down, Lauren asked us if we could do it on our phone, and it was Mary, myself, and Diane, and we all just looked at her with this big blank stare and said,
Yeah.
"Here's our phone." We don't.
Oh.
Uh-oh, they froze. Oh, there we go.
Oh, no.
Okay. All right. So we're starting with Matthew. Was everybody here last week to hear Greg's great
Oh, that was a historical overview.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's probably on
On the
YouTube if you didn't, because he went into a lot of, for me it was very informative.
It was. I loved
As
it.
I've said repeatedly, I don't know very much. So if you weren't here and you want to check that out, he did a great job. He did a great
the
job.
historical part of the Bible.
Is there
Yeah.
anything, David, that you want to add? Maybe some after you thought about everything Greg said. Do you want to add anything? I don't know if you're worried about. Oh wait,
We can't
you're
hear
muted. Do we have to unmute him?
He has
to unmute.
He has to unmute himself. There he
There.
I don't think there's anything necessary to add. It was a very good job. I thought it was very thorough. I enjoyed it myself. So, yeah, it was, gave us a good starting point for Matthew to understand where he's coming from and what his potential target audience is. And, we'll see as we read along what his concerns are, and maybe be able to make some comparisons with some of the other synoptic gospels and John as well.
Does somebody want to start? Greg did the, excuse me. Greg did all the genealogy of Jesus. And thank goodness he didn't ask me to do that, or those names would have never sounded like they were supposed to. But does somebody want to start at
The birth
it looks
of
like
Jesus.
18.
I'll
The birth
read.
of Jesus.
I'll read.
Okay. You want to say what you're reading from?
I'm reading from the New American Bible, Catholic Bible. Okay. Now, this is how the birth of Jesus Christ came about. When his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found with child through the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her husband, since he was a righteous man, yet unwilling to expose her to shame, decided to divorce her quietly. Such was his intention when, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary, your wife, into your home. For it is through the Holy Spirit that this child has been conceived in her. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke, he did as the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and took his wife into his home. He had no relations with her until she bore a son, and he named him Jesus. They're gone?
Oh, wow.
Okay. The visit of the Magi. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, hello, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising, and have come to do him homage. When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it has been written through the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel. When Herod called Magi secretly and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance, he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word that I too may go and do him homage." After their audience with the king, they set out. And behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed by seeing the star. And on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way.
Okay.
So
Any thoughts, or should we continue? I guess.
the one thing I thought is that I think Greg Plus did mention this last week, is that Matthew he focused more on the Annunciation of Joseph. There's nothing in there about the Annunciation of Jesus except that little blurb where the angel is telling Joseph the angel came to Mary. So the Annunciation of Mary is completely missing.
Right. Yeah, that whole story.
Yeah.
That's a big story.
Yeah.
Well, he's trying to establish Jesus in the lineage of David,
Right.
and that
Right.
comes through Joseph, not specifically through Mary.
And I get that. I think it would be weird though if it weren't in other of the Gospels that Mary had an Annunciation too, because believe me, if I were a 14-year-old girl that found myself suddenly pregnant and didn't know how that happened, I'd be scared to death. I'm like, what the hell? What's going on here?
Yeah.
It might be due to who Matthew is trying to reach. If he's trying to reach primarily a Jewish audience, and so a Jewish audience maybe somewhere in the diaspora, that he's trying to establish his credentials as David. And also there was a lot of it was a very patriarchal society too.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
Very true.
But they would have been ready to stone her. That's why
I
he
know.
said that's why that Joseph said he didn't want to shame her. But yeah. So
I thought it was interesting too, the importance they put on dreams here. Both the Annunciation to Joseph, according to Matthew, took place in a dream, as did the warning to the wise men that they shouldn't return back to Herod. The message came in a dream. So it's just interesting to me that in this culture at this time, dreams had some significant meaning, whereas most of us, if we had a dream something like that, we just say it was just a dream.
that was weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
This weird dream last night. But earlier on, like Abraham and Moses, they actually would get visitations from angels, right? Rather than dreams. Is that correct?
That's the way it's presented, certainly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way it's presented.
But it would be hard to know whether it was just being interpreted as a visit versus a dream. So it could
Sometimes
just be the person.
And sometimes they got messages, according to the Old Testament account, they got messages directly from God.
Yeah.
Moses had the encounter with the burning bush, and
Right.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of this, I
Moses
think,
was the only one, right, that really got directly from God.
I think this is very cultural, and I think it reflects the way that they believed in that time and the importance they put on dreams and portents and things like that. In that in that in that culture, in that part of the world, if you read history very much, you know that like even the Romans and the Greeks, they put a great deal of emphasis on dreams and portents. In fact, when Roman armies were going to war, they would sacrifice and they would read the auguries from the sacrifice on whether they should attack or not. So this kind of belief is very common in this culture that the veil between is kind of there, and gods often express themselves through dreams and portents and auguries and things like that. So,
And didn't we just hear in the Passion that it was Pontius Pilate's wife
Right.
that had the dream
Yes.
about? Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
David, I was going to ask, in chapter 2, verse 3, it said, "At this news, King Herod became greatly disturbed, and with him all Jerusalem." Now, I can understand why Herod would have been disturbed at the news of a new king, but how did all of Jerusalem become privy to this and become disturbed as well?
well, I think when the king gets upset about something, things tend to spread.
The whole world is.
And we'll find out later that Herod's motives weren't to go and worship too, but
Right.
he was going to send out the word to Herod was concerned. He saw this baby as a potential rival or something. And so he started to chomping at the bit. And like some political leaders were aware of now, whatever's going through their minds, maybe it just poured out of his lips. And then he went all crazy. And although there isn't a lot of historical evidence for the fact that all these babies the boy babies were killed, at least that's the narrative that Matthew's playing up. And I think, yeah, so what they're trying to say was, Herod was frightened, angry, whatever, and when he got angry, everybody knew, and all of Jerusalem was pretty upset because of what was going on. At least that's the way I would look at it. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of my thinking as well, but I found it a funny sentence to be inserted there, that's all.
Yeah.
Well, I would think too that, didn't he, from my understanding, didn't Herod go to his star readers and his soothsayers, and this was all in the Torah, and he should have known that that they were looking for a special birth. It shouldn't have been a shock to him. It's like, this was happening today.
If I go to Michigan this weekend, today, would you want anything?
Yeah, there were messianic.
You need to save your money. You don't know what that car is going to cost you.
She's talking to her son.
I would say don't do it. And again, every time you do it, it hits my iPad.
We hear you.
Well, yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I don't remember where it was then. You were just talking about, I'm sure he did. Consult his, it doesn't directly tell us one way or the other, as far as what he did or what he didn't do. I was also going to say, messianic expectations weren't quite as great in the Old Testament period where a lot of these prophecies came from. Most of these prophecies at the time were understood to refer to something that was going on contemporarily.
Well,
but in the New Testament, but in the period between, they call it the Second Temple period. In that period between, messianic expectations began to develop by the Hebrews, the scholars, and through different writings they had, these expectations of a messianic king arising again to bring Israel into its position of power as God's people began to come up, and they were expecting someone that was very much like David to come, who would lead them militarily against Rome or whoever was over them at the time, and bring them into a position where they were no longer vassals, but they were, they were in charge as the people of God. So these expectations were very much there, yeah. But I'm not sure they. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I was going to say their expectation of the savior that was promised to Adam and Eve was more of a comic book hero kind of a guy than somebody that was going to come and teach them how to behave more godlike.
They were looking for a military victor, someone like David to throw them off militarily. I think that's fair to say. I'm not sure they equated what happened in Genesis as the whole with the who's going to crush the servant under your foot. I don't think they necessarily interpreted that messianically at that point. I think a lot of those messianic expectations were read back into the Old Testament after Jesus.
I see.
But anyway, yeah, they were looking for another David. They were looking for another one who freed them from the Philistines, unify, they were the unified tribe, and they had all these promises that David's kingdom would never end. And that's what they were looking for. They were looking for someone. In fact, that's what Jews are still looking for in terms of a Messiah. But many of them don't exactly expect a Messiah anymore. But that was one of the great problems, was they were not looking at the suffering servant of Isaiah as the model for the Messiah. They were looking for the conquering king like David. That was the greatest expectation right then in terms of messianic expectations. It was a total surprise to them. The idea that their Messiah could be someone who was born, very humbly, but more importantly, as we'll find out, someone who was crucified. That was just a scandal. Like Paul talked about, that was unacceptable. They couldn't understand that someone would be a Messiah and be a servant and die as a criminal. That those things were just inexplicable to them. Yeah.
So
but of course, Herod didn't understand that. He was just looking at the fact that there were these auguries and portents, and as we've already talked about, those things were taken very seriously. And he saw a potential rival, and he was very, very, very upset about that.
So their whole idea of the king that they were thinking was coming was a powerful ruler that would amass armies and that, versus Jesus, who clearly was a king, but in a very different way. But the way they were looking at a king was a ruler, a powerful ruler. Okay.
A military ruler. Yeah. I think that's true. There's probably very little expectation of the kind of kingdom that Jesus was bringing about, and at the way and what were going to be the operating principles of that kingdom instead of power and might, and that kind of kingdom instead, service and love and self-sacrifice. That just wasn't an expectation they had.
They were expecting a military hero and got a spiritual hero instead.
Yeah, and of course that's another reason that, of course, Herod felt threatened, because he thought, obviously, if I'm king, if this is the Messiah, I'm going to be supplanted. He's going to overthrow me. He had no expectation that Jesus was bringing a different kind of kingdom, so he felt very threatened. Yes, absolutely.
But didn't it turn out that spiritual leaders were threatening to him too, because he beheaded John the Baptist, because John the Baptist was calling out his sinful ways.
Yeah,
but wasn't it his wife that wanted the Baptist heads on a platter?
Yeah, but he went along with it.
Yeah, yes, Jesus was a threat to threat to the politicians of the day, because the way his kingdom operated, the principles under which it operated, were a threat to the way earthly kingdoms function.
Right.
When, yeah, we don't have to. I could do stream of consciousness to go on to other things, but yeah, it was a different kind of kingdom, but it was at the same time threatening. When the early Christians called Jesus Lord, for example, that's a term they used for the Emperor of Rome. So this is a direct, in the language of the New Testament, we find that Jesus is replacing the king as the one to whom they, to the Emperor of Rome. Jesus was replacing him as the one to whom they own primary allegiance, and that was very threatening. Yeah.
Well, I suppose that besides that most of the leaders back in those ancient times, the kings and the pharaohs and stuff, they considered themselves direct blind to God. So Jesus being the new God leader is probably a threat to them too.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Should we move on?
Sure.
Somebody else want to read? All right. No?
Well,
I can read. I can read if
Okay.
you want.
Go ahead.
Me? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
13. I'm reading from the NRSV. Now, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him."
Oh no,
Oh.
you froze.
They're all frozen. Should we go ahead and read or what?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joseph rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod, that what the Lord had said through the prophet might be